Burgess and Bolton's weekly wrap-up.
Hello, Ben.
Hello, Jeremy. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday. And welcome, everybody, to this week's edition of Burgess and Bolton's weekly wrap-up. And we're here live today. First time in a couple of weeks. We had to do pre-records because we're very busy people. So feel free to drop your comments on the LinkedIn chat and we can pick them up here. And this week, we're going to be talking about all things London Market as usual, but a bit of a focus on the BIBA event that you were at, Ben. I was at an AI conference yesterday, which was quite interesting. So I'll give some thoughts on that. And then we've got a bit of news as well. So let's kick things off. Shall we start with the iPad crushing ad that we both saw, and it sparked a lot of controversy because essentially, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ben, but it crushes all of art and history and everything you ever knew and try to create and put it into the iPad because that's all you need now.
Because it doesn't. Yes. So the point is that what the implication of this is that nothing matters other than the Apple product and how thin it is, and everything else can be crushed into that, and therefore it isn't. But and Apple has apologized for this, and someone has done a rerun, so it rewinds the ads, and I've seen that, and it is actually quite a relief because that whole thing when I first saw it made me feel uncomfortable when it was crushing all these things like beautiful musical instruments and artworks and things like that. So it was just creatively a sort of awful kind of bit of imagery of crushing nice things, right? That humans have invented and people have invented, and then all for the sake of a bit of technology, as if the technology is the thing that we all pray to somehow, if you like, the new religion. So there was a massive backlash against this, rightly so, and that's encouraging. It's brilliant. So why? Well, apart from the fact it's interesting, why would we do it on this show? I think because we've talked quite a bit about technology not being the destination, or technology is just an enabler, and it should be viewed as that always. And I know that you and I have sat in with some technology people, and there is often, I'd say, quite a belief that the technology is more important than the people, the industry, the history, the inventiveness, and all that. There's sometimes almost that comment, isn't there? Like, we will replace you completely.
Yeah.
Which I think is utter, totally ill-conceived and rubbish. But this is good in a way that this has happened. We've got to be really careful in a technology era to make sure that we, conserve the things that we are as humans. And this has been quite instructive, I think.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. So Richard Watson, who's a futurologist and quite often speaks at our events, although I think he's retiring now, wrote a book called, I think it was Digital versus Human. And basically one of his, the thesis in the book was, with every kind of technology leap forward, there is also a push back, people going back to kind of analog thing. So if you look now, I think there's a huge increase in vinyl sales, for instance. I think there's much more now than there ever was in the 70s, 80s and 90s, when that was, well, not the 90s, that was CD, but then, so that's quite interesting. There's always this kind of pushback to kind of more creative or analog ways of working and doing things. And you can probably think of loads of examples in your own life, like fishing, for example. That's just such a simple activity. I mean, you don't need digital technology. You need some
No.
technology. You have a carbon rod rather than a piece of wood and all that kind of stuff. But you know what I'm saying.
It's always a tension, isn't it? And I think that in all areas technology comes in, and fishing's a really good example actually, because that is one where some people are very traditionalist and will only use carbon fiber, which is actually pretty good, I reckon, unless you're in a lightning storm. But that sort of, but then there are others, these kind of obsessive carp anglers who have all sorts of ridiculous technology, which I think destroys the purest idea of the sport. So, but that will always be a tension. I think the point as well, though, is about responsibility, isn't it, of these tech companies, really, which is, isn't it scary if those execs can sit in that room and look at that ad thinking it's brilliant?
Yeah.
Because fundamentally, all these very rich, wealthy, powerful people are saying, hey, we can just take the world over with our technology and crush everything in its wake. And that's probably something we've got to push back against a bit. But it's absolutely right. It's about the humans, right? In the end.
Indeed. And
I love my iPad. I do love it.
Yeah, you've got to say, it's great technology.
Yeah, just in case they're listening and they want to sponsor us.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, let's talk about the BI cases, Ben, because you saw this in the FT, I believe, which is kind of going on about the business interruption claims from COVID times. Feels like a long time ago, that. Still kind of dragging on, I believe, and still going through the court system, I think, is really the point that you wanted to.
Yeah, so there's a number of interesting angles to this. One is that, I suppose, is the straightforward one. There's still over 100 unresolved cases worth, they estimate something like 750 million or 735 million. Big names involved, Burger, I say big names, Burger and Lobster. I mean, I like it.
Yeah.
Who doesn't want a burger and lobster together?
Yeah, I've never been.
Surf and turf, isn't it? Hawksmoor, Newcastle Falcons, lots of big companies that are, according to this article anyway, quite angry about this because their policies didn't trigger and they're still fighting it in the courts. Now, overall 1.7 billion was paid out by the insurers, but someone in this article points out, well, in the grand scheme of things, that's very tiny compared with the losses of businesses in general. So all the way through, really, in this article, which, of course, it's in the FT, so it's quite important, there is a sense that insurers are there not to pay claims, to nitpick, to fight everything, even if the Supreme Court says that. So I think this is bad for the industry, bad for the reputation of the industry. Now, I also understand, and might be people listening to this going, well, Ben doesn't know who he's talking about. These people are all just trying to get claim for things that they shouldn't have based on the wording. And we'll come back to that. And the regulator had originally said, well, once this court ruling goes through, you should pay these claims pretty quickly. And their very words were, you shouldn't litigate to the nth degree around this stuff. Now, there's a lawyer here saying, Roger Franklin, who says, well, actually, I think a lot of them are going trying to work out every single point under the sun to claim this. So I don't think, I don't disbelieve that either. I just think, having worked with a lot of insurers, I think some are more inclined to say we will try and pay, and some are inclined culturally or whatever to say we're not. And there could be, and that's kind of how it is. Some of these, onto the intricacies of the policy, and I don't want to go on too much about these, but they really revolve around two things, primarily denial of access, i.e. when lockdown happened, businesses had to shut down. Therefore, they said that RBI policy should cover that. And some of the insurers have argued, and Allianz had one in particular, I'm not picking out Allianz, it's just that they were mentioned in this article, had a wording in their policy which referred to policing policy. In other words, they said that their policy was very specifically about police actions, which said if there was a bomb hoax or a bomb scare or a terrorist incident, they shut your business down, you could claim. And they said it wasn't designed for or meant to cover government actions that indirectly close the business. Some people, of course, have argued that, well, when the government brought lockdown in, police enforced those actions, which I think you and I would agree they did. I mean, you weren't allowed to open those businesses. If you did, police would have been right onto you. I mean, I saw some kids where the police told them to stop playing cricket on a little bit of green grass in lockdown. So I think it seems fair. Some of this seems fair to me. Anyway, the other one I think has been called at the premises, which is where you get illness or people got COVID and had to be at home or whatever, and then that's supposed to trigger as well. And Pizza Express and the Excel Centre in London won their claims on that basis. So all these claims have been going through the courts and still are several years on. And so my question really, and what I wanted to raise this was about something that was said to me quite early on in lockdown, which was by a very senior person who said, Ben, the main thing we've discovered is it's our wordings. Globally, our wordings are atrocious everywhere. And if one lesson is to be learned from this, is we need to sort out wordings. And I think this is what this article is largely about. And you've had a conversation, I've had conversations up at BIBA before I saw this article about the same thing, which is language in insurance is very, very important. And so someone in the comments here says that if those that are in court at the moment, and this is a loss adjuster commenting in this article, saying that a lot of those in court at the moment are those that where underwriters wrote sloppy wordings or let the brokers write sloppy wordings, and now they're fighting it because they realise they made a bit of a mistake, and they've got to pay out. So, but I do not, in this day and age, understand. And I don't think I'm the only one, why on some of these simple, straightforward things, or even if they're complex, the lawyers, the insurers, the brokers can't get this right. It seems daft to me. And more importantly, deliver a product that has that contract certainty, or as it was used to be called, that delivers to the customer. Because otherwise, on the one hand, the reputation is diving. Someone in the comments wrote, well, insurers get policies and then they try and wriggle out of claims. Everybody knows that. It's like, don't we want to change the image of the industry? I mean, I think leadership and insurance leadership needs to think about this, because insurance is often contrasted with other financial services industries like banks and things, where insurance is the one that is seen as not paying out. Is trying, that's its main focus really, is not to pay. I don't think that's true. I mean, I don't generally think that's true.
No.
But when you see articles like this, it's hard to kind of defend the industry in a sense overall.
Yeah. I agree with you. So it's interesting you raise the point about contract certainty, because when we started London Market Claims Conference around about 10 years ago, contract certainty and then claims certainty were kind of top of the agenda, and wordings played a huge role in that. And you kind of wonder why that has not, that work that was done all those years ago, and that kind of culture that was ingrained through both initiatives that were run by the market and the associations and all this kind of stuff, have not continued. It's just it's quite baffling, really.
It is baffling, but it's also a viewpoint, I think, almost a schism in the industry, where some executives, this was described to me again by someone very senior a few years ago, saying that about half, they said something like about half the major insurers that he knew said they were not there to pay claims, and half of them were there saying it's our service proposition is to try and pay claims whenever we can. But this was presented to me anyway as this is just two different viewpoints. It's like Protestant and Catholic or something. In some, it's kind of fundamental to the industry. But given that we are just a business, why can't we face up to that and resolve it and say, well, look, in all of these areas, all of these things, there will be some complexity and some grey areas always, but actually on standard stuff like BI policies and things like that, surely we should be able to get it right. And bear in mind, the lawyers are supposed to be advising on this stuff, and the question mark must be against some of the how the lawyers advise on it and what they're doing around wordings and everything else, and whether it's there's some kind of conflicted situations, which is there's a lot of work in all of this litigation, right? I mean, it's expensive, and we don't want more cost in the industry. That's the last thing we want. So it's a big efficiency issue. It's a reputational issue, I think, and it as you say, it's baffling as to why we can't sort out these things. And actually, I was just getting an insurance policy the other day, a simple one for a house I'm buying for buildings insurance, and between 2 or 3. I won't bore you with the whole long story, but between 2 or 3 different insurers, their descriptions of and questions around flood, for example, were totally different. And if I projected that forward into I have a claim, I would not, as a consumer, know which one was going to pay and which one wasn't, or whether they would pull me up on something on the way that those were defined. One was about how far away I was specifically from the water. The other was whether there had ever been any claims. But none of those questions, I think, should I have been asked, because an insurer can get that from Google.
Yeah.
They know exactly where the property is. They know exactly how far it is from the river, and they can price accordingly. But why are they not? One, why are they not doing that? 2, why do 3 of them come up with different things? So I think this is a whole problem with, we've talked about data, but it's not just data. It's the questions and the kind of wordings and the language, really.
Yeah, it is bizarre. I mean, I told you that I got a new car, and I got a quote from one insurer. There was like 1,500 quid, and then it was £300 from another one to add it onto an existing policy. And I was just. I don't know. It's built, either they didn't want me and just used price as a blunt tool.
I agree. I mean, all of this is part and parcel of the same thing, isn't it? It all looks bad because it looks as if we don't know what the hell we're doing. I mean, we won't talk about it massively now, but this whole Range Rover thing about someone told me the other day they knew someone who was charged 15 grand a year for their admittedly expensive Range Rover. But, these are stories, and they're kind of a bit apocryphal, I suppose, but they also show the industry that doesn't really have a handle on its data.
Yeah.
And its wordings.
Yeah. Something we'll pick up at London Market Claims, I'm sure, because it really does impact client experience. Really does. Okay, let's move on, because we've got to be quick today. Now, you were at BIBA, Ben, this week. Just give us a summary, and then we'll play a clip.
Oh, it's amazing. 9.5, over 9,000 people, record attendance. One of the biggest conferences in Europe, the biggest one that's run. It's in Manchester at the Manchester Central. It's all crammed into about a day and a half. Masses going on. We had a stand. Really interesting. Lots of really very interesting conversations. A conference like that, I think you just see the broad spectrum of the whole industry. So really every type of organization was there. So, 1 minute I was talking to someone from the Treasury, then the FCA, then to an insurtech, and then to an insurers and broker, and you do get a sense that, just of the scale of the industry and what it was doing. So it's a mix of conference talks with celebrities and all sorts, talking about random things. David Coulthard was there on the stand. Bloody good looking bloke.
Is he?
I just have to say that. I mean, he's rich, ex-Formula One driver.
Yeah.
Tall, good looking. I mean, women were like punching each other out of the way to get selfies with him.
That's it. And at BIBA, so he really is living the dream. Yeah.
Well, yes, because funnily enough, the chief exec, Graham Trudgill, said in his keynote that he had always aspired to be an F1 driver or an astronaut or a fighter pilot, but he'd settled instead for insurance broking.
There you go. So we're going to play a clip just to give us a sense of what it was like there. And I think you're kind of looking at this through the lens of brands.
Yes, I just wanted to share this because you run conferences, obviously, and stands and things are quite, they're not probably seen as the most interesting, but honestly, when you go to this and you know what's happening in this world, there is scale conferences coming. They're massive opportunities to brand. And a lot of people ask the question, why do people spend all this money to do this? But so Julian Steedman from Brandex and I who both run Insurindex, we walked around, just did 2 or 3 brands really, just to sort of chat through some of them. But that's what this is about, and we'll come back to it.
Great. Here we go. Maybe we don't. Shall I try it again?
Go on, give it one more go.
Look at this. The wheel of death. That isn't working, is it?
Not going to work. So I talk it through.
Yeah, talk it through. So you talked that. So you. So first off, Chubb, wasn't it? Who have a huge stand, and what immediately jumped out to me when I watched the clip was just the vibrancy of the colors that they were using. I mean, and actually, I think you comment on it. It's not just them. It's quite interesting the color palettes.
Yeah. Certainly, if you look across now how insurers are projecting themselves and their brands in terms of design and so on, those colors, and Julian says this, they're really important. So blue is the predominant color still because it's a very safe, conservative color, and it gives you comfort, I suppose, as a color. Science kind of proves that. Yeah. But if you look at the Beasleys and to an extent Chubbs, and quite a few others are now using colors like pink, which are essentially kind of more slightly out there, sort of. I'm not necessarily saying they're more kind of edgy, I guess, as colors. So this color palette is really very important. And then more traditional colors like red. So that's used obviously by travelers and others and so on. So that's the kind of, you can almost look at the industry by how the colors are changing, the identities are changing. So obviously we've moved into more modern logos and idents and things, and we're seeing streamlining of these brands. So AGCS has gone to Allianz Commercial, so all their commercial operations now under one name. And that was actually quite a debate we had with a lot of people at the market as to whether what you do with an insurer that's now straddling several different markets like London specialty, US, and say the UK regions, right? So you go, well, do we call ourselves one name, or do we still refer to ourselves as all the old divisions and so on? I mean, my view simply is that most of these businesses ultimately will go to simple names, because they're too complex, really. You have to, if you're a broker, you have to go in and say, right, okay, I'm going to talk to Allianz Commercial, and you're going to tell me which product I need and what I want from where and how I get it. But I shouldn't really have to find it under a plethora of brand names or idents for those businesses. So that, I think, is changing.
And I think we saw that with Howden, didn't we, recently? Yeah. They brought everything under one Howden banner.
Brand. Yeah. And so Howden have used both the branding, if you like, of the organization to create a new modern logo for it, but also values and things underneath, which are very important in terms of delivery. But also they use the physical assets because they bought A-Plan. So all of the offices around the country, they've used that in quite a neat way by branding all those up. So those physical brand assets, as we call them, are now also being used quite a lot. And one of the things that probably this comes from a bit is in the US, Geico, the insurer, I think motor personal lines insurer mainly, they have a gecko, right? And now you can kind of laugh about it, but that gecko is one of the biggest brand assets in all of business. It is unbelievable. Everybody in America will know the Geico gecko.
Yeah.
And so that sort of, memory stuff to remember that brand in a Me Too market is becoming important. And Julian and I looked at the, we'll post that video if we don't get it today.
Yeah, we'll put a link on.
But it's Beasley, for example, has used the original hat stand and pink bowler hats and things. Now that was, it is amazing. And we were talking to the people on the stand about the Beasley people, and they were saying, God, everybody's been coming up and asking us, can we get a hat? Because they were like hanging on strings or wires, and they were trying to fight people off and grabbing these hats, which is kind of good, because every time that's happening, people are just, it works in memory terms. So from brand perspective, it really works. And as you said, bold colors, Chubb using the single identity. And then the other one we had in the video was Hiscox, which we were both massively impressed by, because it was this digital stand with holographic digital thingies going on. I can't remember what they're called, but Julian told me, and as if I was a fool for asking. And but they were amazing. So you had screens, but the other point that was made about this was just how digital is so valuable now because of the cost effectiveness of running it. So the Hiscox was a big billboard, basically, with fantastic graphics, but very striking with the red and the black, and it just really stood out. But as Julian said, they can use that for the next 5 or 6 years because it's completely reusable. Unlike stands in the past where and I think you've made this point, haven't you? That electronic stands can be reused and repurposed, which is important.
Yeah, definitely. So at our events, we use the light boxes where we have the reusable and washable kind of fabric. So companies they tend to come year in, year out, so they can either use the graphic and carry on using it, or they can update it. But it's all really, it's completely changed from that's on a different scale to what we do.
It is, but it's the same sort of, it's the same sort of thing. And when I was going back, just to answer the sort of question that people ask about what's the point and why do we do this? Well, of course, it might cost you £100,000 to put one of those stands up, or more probably. But if you compare that with other types of, for example, for going on TV in a B2B market, that can work really, really well, because you hit 9,000 people plus, because also you're on social media with it and so on.
Yep.
And you can stick it at every single. So what struck me was, the repeated, and this is obviously good for you and your business, but the repeated attendance and exhibitors at these conferences is one that you go, well, I really just get to know them, Veris, Genesis, Guidewire, all the names we can reel off, because we've seen them at all these conferences and we know the colors and we know they're in our memory bank.
Yeah.
And
definitely.
That's essentially what's going on. So, I think it is, these big conferences now, these scale conferences are really, really worth kind of investing in, and they're interesting. They're kind of working.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's fascinating as well, the way that brands are changing. I think we should probably do something and look back. I think we might have done it a few years ago. Look back at brands, and I think you've got an index as well. So let's do that in a few weeks' time, Ben. I think that'd be
definitely.
Good. Okay, really quick. I just wanted to talk about AI, because you love it, Ben. But no, I'm going to talk about this. Yes, here we go. So Leadership Forum I went to yesterday, navigating the seas of AI, and it had a nautical theme because we were on the HMS Belfast. So there was lots of quite funny talks with people saying things like, we shouldn't go overboard on this. things like that. But it was really good. There was some excellent talks. So quite a lot of people in there from the London market, hence why I'm going to kind of just summarize some of the things that came out. So there are kind of 4 areas that I think I would say were not necessarily new, but I would say were moving the conversation forward. So the first one was that everybody in the room were kind of tech and IT and operations people. So enabling and senior at that. And everybody agreed that technology comes and goes. You know, you think of blockchain, you think of buzzwords like IoT and, big data and all that comes and goes. AI, everyone agreed, is here to stay. It is definitely a technology that is going to be around. And so we need to think carefully about how it's going to impact the world around us, our products, our clients, and how we run our organization. So that was the first thing. I think it was the first time they were saying that they had not felt at the forefront of technology within their organization. So these people who were technology enthusiasts, let's put it that way, could see the benefits. CIOs, operations directors could see the benefits of using digital, now felt that actually it was people using AI, whether it was ChatGPT or whatever it was, were coming to them going, why don't we do this? And they said a little bit like Spider-Man, it's really powerful, but it's also really dangerous if you don't know how to use it. So with great power you have to have great responsibility. So there's a realization that this stuff is moving at pace, and it's not in a kind of firewalled environment where you can test it. People it's out there in the wild. So that was the other thing. And so off the back of that, there was going to be, I think one of the outcomes that I hadn't heard before was the amount of training that's going to be needed across the organization, not just users, but also, everybody from senior management all the way down, so that, we can avoid the risks and make sure the governance is in place. But also there was a real buzz and excitement around some of the user cases that were shown there, and almost all of them, I would say 90% of them, were all about improving client service, enabling people to do better jobs, and becoming then off the back of that more efficient. So I thought it was a really good event. As I say, the majority of the people in the room were London market people. Heard some really good case studies, and it just feels like a very exciting time. I think the other thing to note is that a lot of people of our age have been through these cycles of digital, and I've said this before. So I think there is kind of a, people aren't just investing in the next shiny new thing. They are kind of reflecting on it. They're saying, what is the business case? How is this going to improve whatever aspect? And kind of having a more methodical kind of approach to it than perhaps we saw in the .com madness and also mobile apps and all that kind of thing.
And as you say, I think instinctively it's a technology that's very accessible to everybody, which has not always been the case. I think it's always been a bit of a pretense on the part of the tech industry that all sorts of things are accessible, but actually they're quite tricky when you're just dealing with typical Microsoft type software, even Apple software. You have to work it all out, right? Whereas actually this AI stuff is quite cool and it's quite creative, and you can play around with it. So it does, to me, involve the human element quite strongly, and it's out of the controlling, if you like, hands of the tech people, which we started this conversation with. So I think it is, it's very interesting. Unstoppable.
It is. As one person said, the genie is out of the bottle. And he won't be able to put it back in again. So
exactly.
I think it's this kind of strategic imperative, I think, that has really got people excited, because for the first time, we've said for a long time, if you don't invest in this technology, you get left behind, and it could be any kind of technology. But I think genuinely, people have got to get a grip on this and see how it's going to impact their organizations and their customers. Okay, more on AI, I'm sure. Right, let's wrap things up, Ben. So what are you doing this weekend? Anything good? Climbing?
Doing a bit of climbing and family over, so not too much. Be all right. Quietish.
Right.
Quietish. You?
There's a sofa being delivered this afternoon, and I have a funny feeling it's not going to go into the room that we've decided.
That's always the way with sofas. That's always the way.
We were looking at the doors going, these doors, because we had a conversion done, so the doors are quite narrow, and I was going, I don't know if it's going to go in. So we're going to have a sofa.
Take some photos.
Yeah. Anyway, it might be on eBay later. If anybody wants to buy it.
Sofa. Yeah, just punt it over to me when I move in.
Okay. Good. Excellent. Right. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. We will be back next week with more of the same. And have a good weekend.
Have a great weekend, all. Bye.